Hi and welcome to the Financial Fox. My guest today is Ajeet Khurana, CEO of one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges, ZebPay. He's a strong believer in the social value of cryptocurrencies as a way to improve society. And he has been involved in Bitcoin since the very early days, having worked with the Indian government on different initiatives and projects to implement new technologies. Let's connect to Ajeet.
Very good, Stefania. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much for being on our program so late, in the night where you are. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
So, Ajeet, looking at your social media profile, you make quite a strong statement, which is Bitcoin is not a bubble. Now, lots has been said about cryptocurrency resembling the dot-com boom, particularly after last year's massive rise, and then we had the crash. So what do you think has happened, and why you are so, you believe so strongly that this is not a tech bubble?
When you looked at my social media profile and read that Bitcoin is not a bubble, there was a second line to it. It said that Bitcoin is not a bubble, it is the pin, which means I believe that it is actually the pin which will burst the existing bubble. What I have seen happening with technology, beginning with the availability of email and internet, moving on to e-commerce, digital wallets, payment wallets, e-commerce, mobile devices and the like, is that those people in the world who were left behind by earlier industrial age technologies such as the motor car, for instance, actually have been able to catch up and leapfrog ahead. I see cryptocurrency as overcoming some of the deficiencies of traditional money, especially for people who have been left out and not included in the formal economic financial system. I see cryptocurrency as one of the possible solutions. Naturally, we have a lot more adoption to go through before that actually happens. But I believe that the characteristics of this new asset class make it the most suitable form of money for the internet.
So what do you think is the future of Bitcoin? I mean, it's not the cheapest or the faster cryptocurrency, actually.
So there are two things. First, when we talk about Bitcoin, it is very easy to only focus on the price or the rise or fall of the price of Bitcoin. I think that misses the picture by a big shot. For instance, underlying Bitcoin is a technology called the blockchain. Pretty much like cloud computing, which could be a private cloud or a public cloud or a hybrid cloud, the blockchain also could be a private blockchain or a public blockchain. But the real benefit of harnessing blockchain technology comes from the public blockchain. Public blockchain means that nobody owns it. It is decentralized. There is no owner. There is no requirement of trust. How do you run such a system? The only way you can run it, govern it, and give incentives to people to participate is by having a token, and Bitcoin is such a token. So tomorrow somebody could say, hey, Bitcoin will not be the one, there will be some other token, and it's very difficult technologically to argue with that. But the fact is that public blockchain is a very strong technology. It needs a token such as Bitcoin to run, and today the most widely adopted token is Bitcoin. One Bitcoin may be very expensive, like $3,000 to $4,000, but already today you can divide it into 100 millionth of a Bitcoin, which is called a Satoshi. With the coming of the Lightning Network, in a year or two, you will be able to divide that still further.
Okay, so you are saying basically the adoption of Bitcoin is inevitable, but we can also talk about other cryptocurrency. They work on a public blockchain as well.
That is correct. There are others. In fact, since Bitcoin was the first, there are other technologies that have come in, other currencies, which have actually tried to improve upon some of the limitations of Bitcoin. And frankly, if one of those became the de facto standard, I, for one, would support it. Having said that, one of the characteristics of currency is that it has to have the largest adoption. At this point of time, though there are several contenders for the position of being the most adopted cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is winning the race, and it is winning the race by far. So my bet at present is on Bitcoin, but tomorrow if another cryptocurrency emerges, uses similar underlying architecture but is better, I would support it.
So do you want maybe to say anything about these other contenders? I mean, I'm a big fan of Digibyte, obviously, which is said to be one of the largest adopted cryptocurrency and has got the largest crypto community, and is the longest blockchain. So which other do you have in mind?
So I think, if you don't mind, me not talking more about Digibyte, I think that the top few in my head, as in the number two, would probably be Ethereum. At
Yeah.
one point of time, Ethereum was really huge. Even now, it is huge. But some people are feeling that newcomers such as EOS, some people would even say Tron, are taking the lead. Ripple stands apart in being very different because it is not truly decentralized.
Yeah.
It is actually sold by somebody. So there are supporters of Ripple because it seems a little more like the conventional financial system. And then there is this odd one called Litecoin, which does not have that much of a compelling logic of its own, except that it is very much like Bitcoin, has fairly high adoption, and there are some improvements that it made on the fundamental Bitcoin protocol, which has got people very interested in it. These would be the top few names that come to mind.
Okay, so basically, regarding cryptocurrency, we saw that traditional banks and also financial institutions are a bit, let's say, skeptical about cryptocurrency transaction and the future of crypto assets. I mean, we saw the recent comment from JP Morgan again, and his CEO, that is a famous opposer of crypto. I mean, they really think that banks, they probably should. They will probably find difficulties to keep up with the crypto revolution. So my question is, what the future hold for them, for financial institutions and banks?
So I think that there are three quick ways in which I would like to explain this. One is that some people are ideologically opposed to it because they do not believe that there should be a decentralized system. I think that's a way of thinking. I don't think that way. But ideologically, I'm fine with people holding that position, including traditional banks. Some of them might be worried that if crypto says that they will decentralize and remove central authority, who will be most worried about it? The central authority, or the person we are trying to get rid from the center. So I think that some of the financial institutions could be thinking that way. What is the future of these banking institutions and crypto? I personally would like to see a future where they coexist. For example, when companies were to raise capital in the form of initial public offerings and use the entire large merchant banking, investment banking infrastructure, I would be much happier if this fundraise were tokenized. The asset or the underlying offering was tokenized in some form of a security token, and we got rid of this entire huge machinery which just adds cost and not value, but probably in the traditional system was required. And today I think it can be done over the blockchain. And that is where a lot of financial institutions should put their attention to.
But also one of the points about blockchain is they could actually implement banks and financial institutions with the security aspect, and the verification. And I mean, for instance, Digibyte is working on the DigiID. So I think securing what is the process and, the identification is quite a good element that eventually it could benefit the financial institution. What do you think?
Absolutely. In fact, look at it this way. Every time I hear people talk about fiat currency versus cryptocurrency, and then I'm referring to the people who strongly support fiat and write off crypto, whatever arguments they give, I ask them, hold on, are your arguments valid for currency notes, that is cash, paper money? Because if you're talking of money only in the bank and in digital wallets and payment systems, I understand some of what you're saying. But all the problems that you have with cryptocurrency are far more enhanced in the case of cash, paper money. And that is something that nobody can disagree. Because of the blockchain nature of transactions, even if in a whole chain you can identify or de-anonymize one person because maybe they went through a KYC process or they were signed up on an exchange, you can actually work through the entire chain. So I think in terms of AML, in terms of identification, in terms of records that cannot be destroyed, the cryptocurrency blockchain paradigm actually improves upon the present, and hence present participants should adopt it.
Okay, lots has also been said about the potential benefit of any new technologies that will basically outweigh the associated risk and concern of adoption, which is what we explained until now. This is particularly true in emerging markets such as India. I mean, we are talking about financial inclusion, we are talking about citizen empowerment, we are talking about faster economy that can all be boosted and grow by new technology, including blockchain. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. In fact, a very simple example would be if you look at a very evolved economy such as the United States or much of the developed world, use of credit cards, electronic payment systems, banks, ATMs, they're quite prevalent. If you go to a relatively backward nation compared to these, there might be a situation where there is no electricity or electric power in one third of the nation. Internet connectivity then, of course, becomes a bigger issue. If we have technologies which actually bypass the need to establish all the towers, all the banks, all the ATMs, all the networks for Visa, MasterCard, and the like, and just comes down to just one thing that if you have an internet connection, the money
Yeah,
works.
and a mobile phone as well. Yeah,
That
true.
is correct. That's correct. And for instance, in a country like India, the mobile phone has become so helpful. And while you may think I'm joking, this is an actual statistic that the number of mobile phones in India or the number of mobile phone users in India is greater than the number of people who actually have toilets in their house
Wow.
or access to toilets. Right? That is how core this has become to everybody's need. So if people have that many mobile phones, they can do away with the requirement of that entire financial infrastructure which is required for something as basic as transmitting money from point A to point B. And that is why this is a leapfrogging technology.
Yeah, but we also see, I mean, the main concern comes obviously from the government, and but this particularly is happening in India, where the government is very open to push the fintech sector and financial services, but at the same time is hostile and hesitant on cryptocurrency trading. That is kind of like a contradiction.
You're right. Actually, sometimes I ask myself that if I were a financial regulator or a government, how would I feel about cryptocurrency? And I must say they're in a very difficult position because to some extent they would have to loosen their reign on the control they have over these systems. Of course, I think it is reasonable for them to want to be informed. It is reasonable for them to want to be able to trace, and the blockchain technology could help them with that actually. But because things would be done differently, there could be a period which causes them to worry that there could be chaos or lack of control. So I understand the government's concern. I think that what we need to do is we need to get together and address the concerns as opposed to just say, no, 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 let's not talk about the question or let's not talk about the answer. We should say, what is the question? Let's find the answer to that question.
Okay, so particularly in this, on this point, we know that the government is reviewing some regulation on cryptocurrency. What do you think will be the incentive and the regulation to implement?
So I'll give you a short-term hesitation and a long-term confidence. The long-term confidence is that there is no doubt in my mind that in some more time, such as a year or two, most economies which are hesitating, which would include India, would start adopting cryptocurrency and would create a positive enabling framework. In the short term, however, I'm not sure because I think there are a lot of misconceptions and misgivings have to still be cleared. I think that some regulators around the world, such as the SEC of the US, tend to take a rather let's say independent position. Then some other regulators, such as Switzerland, also take independent position. Some other regulators follow, and some regulators wait for other regulators to have made a decision before they make up their own. So I think that as more and more regulators around the world are becoming open-minded about this great innovative financial technology, others will have no choice but to follow suit because economics does not exist in a vacuum. We are all interconnected, and soon we will be interconnected on the blockchain.
Yeah, in fact. So, I mean, you have been involved with the Indian government on different initiatives and also projects. So, where do you see blockchain technology developing in India in the next coming years, considering that, you know, the government slowly is going to be supportive and slowly they will basically incentivize the use of decentralized application and also cryptocurrency trading. I mean, the population is massive in India. So I think, you know, there will be particular sector, particular areas that you have in mind where we will see most of these growth, basically.
I see this very similar to computer networks leading to the internet, and later I see it very similar to cloud computing. despite the massive power and potential of these two innovations, initially everybody wanted to have it private. That means give me a local area network, don't connect all computers with each other. And in cloud computing, give me a private cloud. I can't store my data on a public cloud. I think that initial efforts by the Indian establishment will probably be more oriented towards the private blockchain, so that there is a high degree of control over the architecture. However, it will soon be found that there are a lot of use cases which really are not suitable for a private blockchain. So either you discontinue the concept of blockchain or get a more public and eventually a completely public blockchain architecture. And I think that that is the way many economies will go in experimenting with blockchain.
Do you have any example? I mean, any particular example
Yes.
where, I mean, if it's like a social media communication or will be a financial transaction, or where do you think we will see the fastest and quickest implementation of blockchain in countries such as India?
Let us look at what has already happened. There is at least one state in India which has announced that certain parts of land records, that is land ownership records, would be put on the blockchain. There is at least one university, government-controlled university in India, which has said that it will start issuing education credentials, such as diplomas and degree certificates, which would be put on the blockchain and can be authenticated on the blockchain. These are very interesting use cases, and unfortunately, these are not happening on a national scale, but they are happening in bits and pieces. And when enough number of these happen, I think the inevitability of the adoption of the blockchain will become clear.
Yeah, you mentioned a really interesting point. Another one could be, for instance, land registry as well.
That is correct. That's correct.
Okay, so one question, a little bit of our curiosity. I mean, some statistics, they show basically the biggest barrier to fintech innovation in India in 2017, that was the date of the research, was data storage, which amounted to 54% through the country. What are your views on these?
So I frankly do not have that statistic with me. Clearly, you have researched something that I'm not aware of. Having said that, data transmission and storage, issues around privacy, issues around physical location and ownership of data are big concerns globally. And in a country like India, also over the last, I think, 2 years, we have started taking them very seriously. And while these concerns are genuine, I think that the solutions are not difficult. Because when something can be solved merely by capital deployment and equipment, it is an easy problem to solve. When something requires a paradigm shift or a change in mindset, I think that is the big problem.
Yeah.
And it is the latter that we are facing with blockchain-related technologies.
Let's talk a bit about ZebPay, which is one of the largest cryptocurrency exchange in India. Do you want to say anything about that, and also maybe about his community, which is developing and becoming stronger?
Despite being the largest in terms of market share, transaction size, number of users, etc., a couple of months back, we discontinued our exchange operations in India because we felt that the regulatory climate was becoming too stringent, and it was difficult for us to do business in the absence of banking support, and furthermore that it could lead to complications or trouble for users also, dependent on how stringent the regulations were. So ZebPay today, the parent company of ZebPay, which is Singapore based, which is where I'm located right now, has actually opened subsidiaries in Europe, and we are exploring global opportunities and trying to bring our expertise of running an exchange for close to 5 years to the rest of the world, and looking very closely at the India opportunity. And when we feel that there is a reasonable regulatory climate that allows for us to transact business and for our customers to be safe, we will once more start our exchange operations in India.
Okay, that sounds really good. One question, there are many scams, obviously, and many projects, they are not really proper projects. How your exchange is behaving and making sure that, you know, any cryptocurrency that comes to your exchange, you know, has got a use case and has got value. How you are protecting yourself? How exactly a coin lists on your exchange?
So very simply, if I tell you that we have only 6 or 7 coins listed on our exchange, that right there would indicate to you that we are not one of those exchanges which goes about listing ICOs or projects for that matter. We are only interested in what is clearly a utility token and what is clearly a coin which powers a public blockchain. So as far as we are concerned, if something is a project where there's an ICO and an issuer and something which has even the closest semblance to being some form of security, regardless of how they classify themselves, we will just not list it.
Okay, now I wanted to ask you a quick question regarding utility token and security token. It looks like, you know, the world is going a little bit more into security token, particularly because most of the utility token in the past, they were actually security token, and the environment was a little bit blurred, and, you know, people not following the rules. And what is your views on security token?
I think that just like we securitized assets all through the 1960s to 1990s, depending on which part of the world you were in, today digitizing those securities or taking it one step further and tokenizing them makes eminent sense. Why should these securities be dumb and depend on the participation of an entire financial infrastructure like registrars, transfer agents, stamp duties, etc.? Why should they not be programmatic? So security tokens are like traditional securities such as equity shares, but they have two huge benefits and no disadvantages. Benefit number one is that they can be programmed to behave a certain way. And benefit number two, unlike stocks, bonds, which is basically debt versus equity, a security token can be programmed to stand for anything. Such as an equity share gives you a share in the ownership of the company. You can create a security token which could do that, or you could create a security token which gives you a share in the revenue of the company or in the share of the intellectual property of the company. So since you can program it, the underlying asset or what is being securitized in this token can be programmed and hence become immutable as well as irrefutable. That is why security tokens are definitely the way to go for all securities into the future. What has happened in the past is that people have issued security tokens or security-like tokens and just called them or try to pretend that they are utility tokens. And this is where a lot of problem has arisen because they have bypassed all security-related norms and best practices simply because they thought it didn't apply to them. We believe it did apply to them.
Yeah, indeed. How long do you think is going to take to have this tokenization of equity of market, basically? Are we looking at 1 year? Are we looking? What's your views on that?
There are two stages to this. One is the securitization and tokenization aspect. I think that's already happening. Progressive territories such as Singapore, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and several others are already coming up with the enabling framework for that. But that is not enough. You need to have platforms such as security token exchanges. You need to have wallets to store these sort of assets. I think that both of these put together, end of 2019 or all of 2020 is where I'm very optimistic to see a sudden creation of a new paradigm for security tokens.
Okay, thank you so much, Ajeet, for your insight. It was great to have you on the show today, and I would love to have you in the studio one day for a face-to-face interview if you ever come to London.
I'm sure that there will be that opportunity. Thank you for having me. It was an honor.
Thank you so much. This is everything from the Financial Fox. I see you next time.